The silence in my apartment was a luxury I had earned, paid for with years of instant ramen, second-hand textbooks, and sleepless nights fueled by cheap coffee and sheer desperation. Every minimalist piece of furniture, every beam of sunlight that sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown condo, was a testament to a battle I had fought and won alone. My name is Amelia, and I was the family's forgotten investment. It all began on a humid August evening, the summer after I graduated high school with honors. The air was thick with the scent of my mother's pot roast and the heavier weight of expectation. I sat at the polished dining table, my acceptance letter to a prestigious university clutched in my sweaty hands. It was my dream, a tangible piece of paper that promised a future beyond our small, stagnant town. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I got in. Full acceptance. They even offered me a partial scholarship, but I'll still need some help with the tuition and living costs." My father, John, didn't look up from cutting his meat. He was a man of few words and even fewer displays of affection. My mother, Mary, however, put on a pained smile. It was the smile she used when a neighbor's casserole was bland or when she had to deliver bad news she secretly agreed with. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," she said, the word hanging in the air like a lead balloon. "But you know things are tight. And college, well, it's a big expense." I looked over at my younger sister, Chloe. She was 2 years my junior, the sparkling, effortless center of our family's universe. That summer, she'd been gifted a brand new convertible for her 16th birthday. Things are tight was a flexible truth in our household. "I've saved up almost $5,000 from my part-time job," I pressed, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "I just need help with the first year's shortfall. Around $15,000. I can get more loans and work on campus for the rest." My father finally put his fork down. His gaze was stern, dismissive. $15,000 doesn't grow on trees, Amelia. You're a smart girl. Too smart, maybe. You think a fancy degree is going to make you happy? You'll just end up with debt. You should get a full-time job here, maybe take a class or two at the community college if you really must. "But, this is my future," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. It was my mother who delivered the final, crushing blow. She reached across the table, patting my hand with a pitying look. "Your father is right. Besides, we need to be practical. We have to think about Chloe's future, too. Her dance competitions aren't cheap, and she has real talent. A God-given talent. You have your books. You've always been able to figure things out on your own. You've always been able to figure things out on your own." It wasn't a compliment, it was a release of responsibility. A dismissal. That night, I cried myself to sleep, the acceptance letter crumpled on my pillow. They hadn't just refused to help me, they had refused to believe in me. They saw my ambition not as a potential for greatness, but as an inconvenience. So, I figured it out. I deferred my admission for a year, worked 3 jobs, waitress, bookstore clerk, and weekend house cleaner, and saved every penny. I lived in a tiny, roach-infested room I rented from a crabby old woman. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find, writing essays until my fingers were numb. I took out student loans that felt like a mountain of chains around my ankles. For 4 years, while Chloe was going to prom, getting her convertible detailed, and enjoying lavish family vacations I was never invited on because I had to work, I was studying. I was surviving. I ate oatmeal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I wore clothes from thrift stores. I never called home to ask for a single dollar, partly out of pride, but mostly because I knew the answer would be no. The silence from their end was deafening. They rarely called, and when they did, it was to tell me about Chloe's latest achievement. I graduated, summa cum laude, with a degree in software engineering. No one from my family attended the ceremony. They had a prior commitment, a weekend trip to a spa resort for my mother's birthday. I threw my cap in the air, surrounded by strangers, and felt a profound sense of loneliness and fierce, unyielding pride. The years that followed were a blur of hard work. I got a job at a small tech startup, poured my soul into it, and rose through the ranks. I was good at what I did. I was innovative. When the company was acquired by a tech giant, my stock options, once little more than hopeful paper, transformed into a small fortune. I moved to the city, bought my condo, and built a life for myself. A life they had no part in creating. I traveled, invested my money wisely, and found a circle of friends who became my real family. The calls from home became slightly more frequent once they heard about my success, but they were always superficial, tinged with a strange mix of pride they hadn't earned and resentment they couldn't hide. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she was about to ask for something. "Amelia, darling. We have the most wonderful news," she chirped. "Chloe is engaged. To a wonderful boy, a doctor. We're all just over the moon." I offered my congratulations, a genuine flicker of happiness for my sister stirring within me. Maybe this could be a bridge. "We're having a celebratory dinner this Saturday," Mom continued. "At the manor downtown. Please, you have to be there. We have so much to discuss about the wedding. It's going to be the event of the year, and as her big sister, you're going to be such an important part of it." An important part. The phrase echoed in my mind, a hollow sound against the backdrop of years of being treated as anything but. A cold knot formed in my stomach, a premonition I couldn't shake. But I agreed to go. For Chloe. And perhaps, for the foolish, lingering hope that after all these years, they finally saw me. The manor was an ostentatious place, all gilded mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and hushed, reverent service. It was the kind of restaurant my parents would normally scoff at as a waste of good money, which was my first clue that this dinner was a performance. I arrived dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, feeling like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe as I watched my parents and Chloe, along with her new fiancé, Mark, hold court at a large, circular table. Chloe leapt up to hug me, her diamond engagement ring a blinding flash of light. "Amy! You made it! Isn't this all so exciting?" She was beautiful, radiant, and completely oblivious. She had always lived in a world softened by the cushions of our parents' favor, and it showed. Her fiancé, Mark, seemed pleasant enough, shaking my hand with a firm, confident grip. He was a resident, he explained, with tired but kind eyes. My parents were a study in forced casualness. My father, in a suit that was slightly too tight, clapped me on the shoulder with unfamiliar familiarity. "Amelia. Good to see you. You're looking well. The city suits you." "It's the money that suits her," my mother chimed in with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're so proud." The conversation over dinner was a carefully curated highlight reel of Chloe's life, her proposal story, a hot air balloon ride at dawn, her plans for the future, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and her every passing thought on floral arrangements and color palettes. I was the silent audience, a smiling, nodding ATM in their minds. I was beginning to suspect. They waited until after the dessert plates were cleared. My mother cleared her throat, placing a large, white, leather-bound binder on the table. It landed with a soft, expensive thud. "All right," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Let's get down to the fun part. The wedding." She opened the binder, revealing pages of magazine clippings, fabric swatches, and glossy photos of fairy tale venues. "Chloe has always had a very specific dream for her wedding day," my father said, leaning forward. His tone was serious, as if discussing a major business deal. "And we think she deserves to have it. She's a good girl." I nodded slowly, a sense of dread coiling in my gut. "It all looks beautiful. What's the budget you're all working with?" Chloe giggled, looking at Mark. "Oh, we haven't really thought about a budget. We've just been dreaming." My mother patted Chloe's hand. "That's what your father and I are for, sweetheart. And your sister, of course." She turned her gaze to me, her smile now a finely sharpened tool. "We've done a preliminary costing of Chloe's dream vision. The venue she wants, the couture gown, the catering for 300 guests, the 10-piece band, the honeymoon in Bora Bora. It's a lot, but for a once-in-a-lifetime day, it's worth it. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a spreadsheet, with line items and figures. My eyes scanned down the list, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity. At the bottom, in bold, was the total. $250,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. I looked up, expecting them to laugh, but they were all watching me with expectant faces. "This is a lot," I managed to say, my voice a hoarse whisper. "It is," my father agreed, his expression unyielding. "Mark's family is contributing a generous amount, and your mother and I are liquidating some savings. We're putting in everything we can." He paused, letting the weight of his next words land. "We've earmarked a contribution for you, Amelia. As the maid of honor, and as her successful big sister." My mother leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We thought you could cover the main part. The venue, the catering, and the dress. It comes to about $150,000. $150,000. The number echoed in the silent, cavernous space of my memory. It was 10 times the amount I had begged for. 10 times the amount that would have saved me from years of hardship, hunger, and soul-crushing debt. The amount they had dismissed as an impossible extravagance for a 4-year education, they now expected me to hand over for a one-day party. I stared at them, my mind flashing back to that dining table a decade ago. The dismissive wave of my father's hand. My mother's pitying smile. The crushing finality of the word no, the years I'd spent feeling like a ghost in my own family, my achievements ignored, my struggles invisible. And now, my success had made me visible to them again, but only as a resource to be tapped. You're asking me for $150,000? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's not asking, Amelia," my mother corrected gently, as if I were a child who didn't understand. "It's family. This is what families do for each other. You have so much now. For you, it's probably not even that big of a deal. For Chloe, it's everything. It's her dream." Chloe looked at me, her blue eyes wide and pleading. "Please, Amy. It would mean the world to me. I just want everything to be perfect." I looked from my sister's entitled, innocent face to my parents' expectant, demanding one. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. They refused to invest in my future, but they expected me to finance my sister's fantasy. The wound I thought had scarred over was ripped open, raw and bleeding. I felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. It was an anger born of years of being told I was on my own. I had built my life, my success, my fortune, brick by painful brick, without a single ounce of help from them. And they were now standing before me, holding out their hands, not to help me up, but to take what I had built. I slowly pushed the spreadsheet back across the table. I needed to think. I needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with their entitlement. "I need some time to think about this," I said, my voice betraying none of the seismic turmoil inside me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "It was lovely to meet you, Mark. Congratulations again, Chloe." I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them sitting in a stunned silence. The cool night air hit my face, but it did nothing to quell the fire raging within me. They hadn't just asked for my money. They had asked me to validate a lifetime of unfairness, to pay for the privilege of being the daughter they had always been willing to sacrifice. And as I walked down the street, the answer was already forming in my mind. It was a simple, 2-letter word they had taught me the meaning of a long, long time ago. The silence from my family lasted exactly 12 hours. I had spent the night staring at my ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, resolute fury. The next morning, as I was sipping my coffee and trying to focus on a work presentation, my phone began its assault. It started with my mother. Her text was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Dearest Amelia, I hope you slept well. We were all a little taken aback by your abrupt departure last night. Chloe was very upset. She's worried she did something to offend you. Please call me. I ignored it. An hour later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was soaked in theatrical sorrow. Amelia, it's your mother. I don't understand why you're doing this. This should be a happy time for our family. You're tearing us apart. Chloe is in tears. Is this about the money? We can talk about it, but you need to understand, this is for your sister. Next came Chloe. Her approach was different, a direct emotional appeal. She called me, her voice thick with tears. Amy? Why are you being like this? She sobbed. Mom said you're not going to help. Don't you want me to be happy? It's my wedding. I always dreamed you'd be my maid of honor, helping me plan everything. Is it because of Mark? Don't you like him? It has nothing to do with Mark, Chloe, I said, my voice tired. It's more complicated than that. What's complicated? She sniffled. You have the money. I don't understand what the big deal is. My friends' sisters are helping them pay for their weddings. It's normal. Why do you have to be so selfish? Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. I, who had clawed my way out of poverty they had been content to leave me in, was selfish. I, who had never asked them for anything after their first and final rejection, was the selfish one. I have to go, Chloe, I said, my patience wearing thin. I couldn't have this conversation with her. She was a product of their system, a pampered princess who couldn't see the castle walls were built on a foundation of neglect for her own sister. The pressure escalated. My father, who rarely initiated contact, sent a curt, commanding text. Amelia. Call your mother. You are being disrespectful and ungrateful. We did not raise you to behave this way. Oh, but you did, I thought bitterly. You raised me to be self-sufficient. You raised me to understand that I was on my own. I was just finally behaving as such. The next phase of the campaign involved weaponizing the extended family. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called me that afternoon. I made the mistake of answering. Amelia, honey, it's your Aunt Carol. Your mother called me, she's just beside herself, she began, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. She told me about the wedding and your hesitation. Sweetheart, I know you've done very well for yourself, and we're all so proud. But you can't forget where you come from. Family is the most important thing. You wouldn't have all that success if it wasn't for the upbringing your parents gave you. The hypocrisy was staggering. My upbringing? The one where they told me my dreams were a waste of money? Aunt Carol, I said, my voice dangerously calm. With all due respect, you don't know the full story. I know that your sister deserves a beautiful wedding and you're in a position to give it to her, she said, her tone shifting from concern to scolding. It's a shame to be so tight-fisted with your own flesh and blood. It's not a good look, Amelia. I ended the call. They were painting me as a cold, miserly villain, a dragon hoarding gold in her city tower, refusing to share with the deserving villagers. They were conveniently erasing the entire first chapter of my story. For a few days, I let myself feel the sting. The guilt was a phantom limb, an old ache I thought I had amputated years ago. Was I being cruel? Was I letting my past bitterness ruin my sister's happiness? I spent hours pacing my apartment, the beautiful, quiet space I had fought so hard for. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of my windows. The woman staring back was tired, but she was not weak. That's when the clarity came. This wasn't about Chloe's happiness. If it were, they would have been happy with a wedding they could collectively afford. This was about status. It was about my mother wanting to show off to her friends. It was about my father seeing my success as an extension of his own, a resource he was entitled to. And for Chloe, it was about getting the fairy tale she had been taught her whole life to expect, without ever questioning the cost to others. The final straw was an email from my father. It wasn't emotional or manipulative. It was cold, hard, and threatening. Subject: a simple matter. Amelia. Your mother is a wreck and your sister is heartbroken. This has gone on long enough. I have transferred $1,500 from our savings account to your bank account, the one we co-signed for you when you were 16. Consider it a seed. A gesture of goodwill. We expect you to do the right thing and match it, and then some. This is not a request. This is about your duty to this family. Do not disappoint us further. Dad. I stared at the email, then checked my bank account. There it was. A $1,500 deposit. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it sent a jolt of pure, white-hot rage through me. He was treating me like a broken appliance, trying a small fix before realizing it needed to be replaced. That small deposit was meant to be a leash, a reminder that they still had some perceived hold on me. It was then that I knew what I had to do. The time for silence was over. The time for polite avoidance was over. They wanted an answer. I would give them one. Not over the phone, and not through a text. I would deliver it in person. I would look them in the eyes and make them listen, for the first time in my life, to the full story. I would make them see the ghost of the girl they had left behind. I booked a train ticket back to my hometown for the upcoming weekend. I didn't tell them I was coming. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. I drove my rental car down the familiar, tree-lined street of my childhood. The houses were the same, the lawns were meticulously kept, but it all felt alien, like a set from a movie I had once starred in. I parked in front of my parents' house, the same beige two-story building where my dreams had first been dismissed. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of cut grass and repressed memories. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had, a relic from a life I no longer lived. I walked in and found them in the living room, Chloe included, looking at wedding magazines. The sudden silence as they saw me was thick and immediate. Amelia, my mother said, her hand flying to her chest. You should have called. I'm here to give you my answer, I said, my voice steady. I remained standing while they sat, a small but significant shift in the power dynamic. The answer is no. I will not be giving you $150,000 for Chloe's wedding. Chloe burst into tears immediately, a predictable, Pavlovian response. I knew it. You hate me. My father's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. After everything we've done for you, this is the gratitude we get? We gave you a home. We fed you. We clothed you. You did, I agreed, my voice cutting through Chloe's sobs. You did the bare minimum required by law. You gave me a roof over my head, but you never gave me a foundation. You are asking me for $150,000 for a party. A one-day event. I want to remind you of another number. I paused, looking each of them in the eye. $15,000. That's the number I came to you with 10 years ago. Not for a party, but for an education. For a future. It was 1/10 of what you're asking for now. And what did you tell me? I turned to my father. You told me it was a waste of money and that I should get a job at the local diner. You told me a smart girl like me could figure it out. I turned to my mother. And you? You told me you had to be practical and save for Chloe's God-given talent. You patted my hand and told me I was on my own. So I was. I figured it out. The memories, once a source of pain, were now my armor. Do you have any idea what figuring it out looked like? It looked like working 3 jobs until I collapsed into bed at 2 a.m., only to get up at 6 a.m. for a shift before my classes. It looked like living on oatmeal and plain pasta because I couldn't afford groceries. It looked like getting sick and having no one to call because I didn't want to be a burden. It looked like celebrating my graduation alone because you were at a spa. I pulled out my phone and swiped to a photo. It was me, years younger, asleep at a library desk on a pile of books, a half-eaten cup of instant noodles beside me. I'd taken it as a grim joke at the time. Now, it was evidence. This was my reality while Chloe was getting a new car for her birthday, I said, my voice cracking with a decade of suppressed emotion. You didn't invest in me. You didn't support me. You abandoned me when I needed you most. The success I have now, the money you so desperately want a piece of, I built it not because of you, but in spite of you. I built it on a foundation of your rejection. My mother was pale, her mouth slightly agape. My father looked like he wanted to yell, but for once, he seemed at a loss for words. You're not entitled to my money, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You're not entitled to the fruits of my labor when you refuse to plant a single seed. You don't get to ignore me for years and then suddenly call me family when you want something. That's not what family is. Family is supposed to be the people who believe in you when no one else does, not the people who tell you your dreams are too expensive. I looked at Chloe, whose sobs had subsided into quiet hiccups. And Chloe, I am happy you're getting married. But your dream wedding shouldn't be built on a foundation of my nightmares. If Mark's family and mom and dad can't afford a $250,000 wedding, then you can't have one. It's that simple. It's a lesson I had to learn the hard way. I then turned my attention back to my father. And as for the $1,500 you deposited into my account, that was a new low. Trying to buy my compliance? To assert some kind of control? Don't worry. I'm donating it. I had already made the transfer that morning. I've donated it to a scholarship fund at my alma mater for first-generation students from low-income families. So a girl just like me, whose parents tell her she's on her own, will get a little bit of the help that I never got from you. The silence in the room was absolute. I had said it all. I had emptied the years of resentment and pain onto their pristine living room carpet. There was no apology in their eyes. Just shock, anger, and a dawning, horrified understanding that their cash cow had just walked out of the slaughterhouse. If you can't accept my decision, I said, walking toward the door, if you can't see the hypocrisy in what you've asked of me, then I don't think there's anything left for us to talk about. My mother finally found her voice, a weak, trembling whisper. So that's it? You're choosing money over your family? I stopped at the door and looked back at them, a sad, final smile on my face. No. I'm choosing myself. You taught me how. I'm just finally good at it. I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a chapter, a lifetime, finally ending. The sound of freedom. The weeks following the confrontation were an exercise in radical silence. My phone, once besieged by their demands, fell quiet. I was blocked on their social media accounts. It was as if the person named Amelia had been surgically excised from the family history. The initial feeling was not relief, but a hollow, echoing emptiness. I had won the battle, but the victory felt like standing alone on a deserted battlefield. My friends, my found family, rallied around me. They listened, they brought over wine and takeout, and they reminded me that I had made the only choice I could. They put you in an impossible position, Amelia, my best friend Sarah told me one night. They asked you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You just refused to light the match. Slowly, the emptiness began to fill with something else, peace. It was a quiet, steady peace that came with no longer waiting for an apology that would never come. It was the freedom of not having to perform a role in a family drama I never auditioned for. My apartment, once a symbol of my solitary struggle, now felt like a sanctuary I had rightfully built. About 4 months later, curiosity got the better of me. A mutual acquaintance, a distant cousin who always remained neutral, posted photos from Chloe's wedding. I clicked through them, my heart beating a little faster. The wedding had happened. But it was not the fairy tale extravaganza from the white binder. It was at a local country club, not a historic castle. Chloe's dress was pretty, but it wasn't couture. There were maybe 75 guests, not 300. It was a perfectly nice, normal wedding. A wedding they could actually afford. Chloe was smiling in the pictures, and she looked happy. Genuinely happy. Seeing those photos, a strange and unexpected emotion washed over me. It wasn't smugness or satisfaction. It was a quiet sense of validation. Her happiness wasn't contingent on a $150,000 contribution from me after all. Her dream, it turned out, was to marry Mark. The rest was just noise created by our parents. Maybe, just maybe, this experience had forced her to learn a small piece of the lesson I had learned a decade ago: you make do with what you have. Life moved on. I poured myself into my work, proposing a new initiative at my company to mentor young women in tech. I found a deep sense of purpose in it, in being the person I had so desperately needed when I was starting out. I traveled to Japan, a trip I'd always dreamed of, and stood under a shower of cherry blossoms, feeling a sense of profound gratitude for the life I had forged. One afternoon, I received an email from the university's scholarship department. It was a thank you note from the first recipient of the donation I had made in my family's name, the On Your Own scholarship. The student, a young woman named Maya, wrote about how her family couldn't support her college ambitions and how the grant, though small, had made the difference between dropping out and staying in. It covered her textbooks and a meal plan for a semester. Knowing that someone out there believed in me enough to help, even a stranger, has given me more hope than the money itself, she wrote. Thank you for being that person. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. This was it. This was the full circle moment. The $1,500, sent by my father as a manipulative tool, had been transformed into a symbol of hope. I hadn't just broken the cycle of my family's dysfunction, I had used its toxicity to create something positive in the world. A year after the confrontation, a single text message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. It was a beautiful wedding. We missed you, Mom. I stared at the message for a long time. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. Just a simple, guilt-laden statement designed to pull me back in. A decade ago, a message like that would have sent me spiraling, desperate for their approval. But the woman I was now was different. She was forged in fire, built on a foundation of self-respect. She knew her worth, and it wasn't determined by their conditional love. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. I did not block the number. The absence of a response was my final answer. It wasn't born of anger anymore, but of acceptance. I accepted that they would never change. I accepted that the family I yearned for would never exist. And I accepted that my life was infinitely richer and more peaceful without them in it. My story wasn't about the $150,000. It was never about the money. It was about the price of my own peace of mind, my own self-worth. And I had finally realized, after a long and painful journey, that it was priceless. I was no longer the forgotten investment. I was my own greatest asset, and I was finally, completely, free.